Egypt has criticized the United States after it reportedly withheld $195 million, £152 million, in military aid and cut $96 million in other aid over human rights concerns. An Egyptian foreign ministry statement said the move, which has not yet been announced, reflected poor judgment. U.S. officials were said to be unhappy that Egypt's president had recently ratified a new law regulating NGOs. The law states that NGOs are prohibited from conducting activities that harm national security, public order, public morality or public health, strictly controls their funding, and gives the government the authority to monitor their activities. Violations are punishable with sentences of 1 to 5 years in prison and a fine of 50,000 to 1 million Egyptian pounds, $2,820 to $56,400. 8 civil society organizations warned in June that the legislation ushered in unprecedented levels of repression and would criminalize the work of many NGOs in Egypt, making it impossible for them to function independently. On Tuesday, The Washington Post cited U.S. officials as saying that Secretary of State Rex Tillerson had notified Mr. Shokri by telephone of his decision to withhold $195 million of the $1.3 billion Egypt receives in military aid, and to reallocate to other countries $65.70 in additional military aid and $30 million in economic aid. The unspent money would be held in a bank account until Egypt showed some progress on key priorities such as human rights abuses and the law regulating NGOs, the officials added. Egyptian officials gave the U.S. assurances earlier this year that the NGO law would never take effect, according to Reuters news agency. Egypt sees this measure as reflecting poor judgment of the strategic relationship that ties the two countries over long decades and as adopting a view that lacks an accurate understanding of the importance of supporting Egypt's stability, it said. A copy of the foreign minister's schedule sent out to journalists also showed that he would no longer be meeting the U.S. delegation led by Mr. Kushner in Cairo on Wednesday. No reason was given. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has launched a sweeping crackdown on dissent since leading the military's overthrow of his predecessor, Mohamed Morsi, in 2013 following mass protests against his rule. Human rights activists say more than 1,000 people have been killed and tens of thousands arrested since then. Most have been supporters of Morsi and his Muslim Brotherhood, but liberal and secular opposition activists have also been targeted. The security forces have also been accused of committing flagrant abuses, including torture, enforced disappearances and extrajudicial executions. Former U.S. President Barack Obama froze some military assistance in 2013. He insisted the restrictions would continue until Egypt showed credible progress towards democracy, but ended up restoring the military support in 2015 because it was in the interest of U.S. national security. In April, 3 months after taking office, President Trump said he wanted to reboot relations with Egypt and declared that he was very much behind Mr. Sisi. Mr. Sisi praised Mr. Trump's unique personality and reportedly sought an increase in the $1.3 billion in military aid that Egypt receives annually to help battle an insurgency in the Sinai Peninsula by jihadist militants from so-called Islamic State.